Okay, cool. Hi everyone. So this is building productivity app in vanilla JS. And this is our code of conduct, our mission, vision, values, and our target are engineers with 2 or more years of experience looking for support and resources. We have a lot of members worldwide. And this is our movement. And please don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So yeah, this is building productivity app in vanilla JS. So my name is Nayeon. It is pronounced Da-yeon. And I'm actually a lead on the Python track, but I wanted to give a talk on the front-end track because I haven't been involved in the front-end track very actively. So today's agenda. So if you have read the description of my workshop, you'll have an idea of what momentum is. First, we'll have an overview of momentum, and we'll look into the introduction to the project from the motivation, description, tech stack, features, and I'll also introduce how I implemented each feature by looking at the code and by looking at some parts of the project that make the whole project in total. So overview of momentum. Momentum is a Chrome extension with a lot of users, and it is a productivity tool. On the first page, it has grading. So it is grading me by my name. And the thing, let me open up. Oh, I don't think there's a pointer. I hope you can see my cursor though.
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. So the thing you see here is the focus of the day, and there's also some inspirational quote, and you can see the to-do list, and there's a setting, and this is the clock. And if you click on the to-do, then you see a to-do list, and you can add or delete your to-dos here. And on the top right of the screen, there's the current weather. So you can see the current weather where you are, and I actually masked where I am because I don't want to publicly announce it on the internet. And this is the focus of the day. But it comes with quite a lot of limitations without the upgrade to Plus. But I'm a broke college student, and if I was making money, I would have definitely considered upgrading to Plus, paying money regularly. However, since I don't have a job at the moment, I thought I should probably try building something similar. So here goes the introduction to the project. So momentum is great, but I really wish it was more customizable. For example, can I get random background images, or can I have settings and to-do list on different pages? Because if we go back to the main screen, there's quite a lot of stuff on the homepage, and I want to separate those things out. And can I also just freely add and delete the features of the tool? So because of this, I thought I should just try building something for myself because we are developers who are also builders. So the name of this project is Your Haru, and Haru is actually pronounced Haru, and it means day in my language, so I just chose the word. And the type of the project is a static web application. Static means there's no server. And web application is a website where you can interact with features. So in short, there's only front end and you can interact with the website. And the time I spent for this project is roughly about 2 weeks. And this is a GitHub repository. I also put that in the chat, and feel free to leave it a star. And this is the link to the website. It is included in the description of the project in the event announcement. So the tech stack. I actually used just the basic and minimum front-end tech stack, which is HTML, CSS, Vanilla JS. And Vanilla JS means I didn't use any JavaScript frameworks or libraries. It is just pure JavaScript. And why I chose this tech stack is actually that I just wanted to practice HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I thought there's no need for a server because building the UI itself would be enough. And by the way, if I haven't talked about this, the Q&A will be conducted at the end of the session. So feel free to leave your questions in the chat or just keep a note of it and then ask it at the end. So first, these are some features. So first, it asks for the permission to access your location. And this is just to display the current weather where you are, but you can also block it if you want. But if you block it, you will not be able to see the weather. And the sign-in modal. So modal means it's like a pop-up, and you get to type in your username. And if you press enter, the form gets submitted and the web application greets you by your username, and you can see the clock and date. And this is real time. And actually, if you refresh the page, you get a random background image. So every time you refresh, you get a new one. And there's a to-do list, which is on the second tab of the menu. And you can cross some to-dos off, or you can just delete a to-do if it is done. And on the third tab, we have settings. You can rename your username, and you can toggle some options such as 24 format clock, or if you want to enable dark theme, you can just click on it. And if you're left-handed, you can use the menu on the left, and there's even a button to reset your data. So in the settings, this is what it looks like when all the options turned on. So with the 24-hour clock and dark theme and left menu on. Implementation. So this is a project structure. So first, you see there's a whole bunch of CSS files. So all the CSS files live within the CSS folder. And inside the CSS folder, I put the screens folder and some other CSS files. So the CSS files that are not in the screens directory are the styles that apply to everything, or the styles that used repeatedly. And inside the screens folder, I put the styles that are specific to each screen. By screen, I mean the home page or the to-do list or setting, etc. And for JavaScript, you see global, navbar, setting, sign-in, time, to-do, transition, and weather. And I think the file names are pretty self-explanatory except for global.js. So global.js is a file that contains the variables that are used in more than one JavaScript file. So I wanted to keep them in a separate JavaScript file. And the JavaScript files are divided by feature, in contrast to CSS being divided by screen. And I have the index HTML on the root. So basically, index HTML is the only HTML file. If you go to this link, I'm going to put this in the chat. You can see I basically stacked every element on top of each other. So inside the body tag, there's this background, and there's the sign-in modal, and home screen, to-do screen, settings screen, navigation bar, and at the end, I inserted script tags, and I closed the background tag. Not background tag because it's actually a div, but I just wanted to make it look like HTML tags. So actually, without any CSS or JavaScript or any images, it looks something like this. It's just the bare bone of my web application. And also this. You can see the images are corrupted because I didn't include any here. So you might be wondering, why this project structure? And I want to talk about my personal preference of importing CSS to HTML. So personally, I like only importing the same and one main CSS file in every HTML file like this. In the index.html, there's only just one line importing CSS because I don't prefer using inline CSS, and inline CSS is directly applying style inside an HTML element. Or I don't like having CSS inside HTML files using the style tag within head. Or even just having one super long CSS file for everything and importing it in HTML. So I personally prefer making separate CSS files for different components and importing all the other CSS files into the main style.css, and then just importing style.css only into every HTML file I have. And style.css should look like this. This way, we don't have to manually import all the CSS files and have so many import lines and head. See how messy it looks like. So if I don't import every CSS files into the main file, I would have had to import every CSS file into HTML. Or this way, we don't have to check what CSS file or files to import in different HTML files. For example, let's say I have page 1 .html, and for this I should use page 1 style1.css, and for different pages I should use different CSS files, and I don't want to check this manually. So because of this, I'm just importing every CSS into style.css, and I'm just importing style.css into HTML. And to talk about the CSS files on the root, we have reset.css, and reset.css is actually something publicly there, like on the internet, because it is a very useful file and it is there for free. You can use it to normalize browsers' default styles, because by default, HTML elements have some styles, and I want to just reset everything and start from there. And style.css is the main CSS file I want to import. And transition.css is a file that includes classes for fade in and fade out animations. And I also created variables.css, which has CSS custom properties, or which I call variables. And I basically made the values that are repeatedly used for variables, such as font, colors, or the speed of animations. And background.css has background image, home screen, navigation bar. But now that I think about it again, I think it would have been better if home screen was separated out. And settings.css has the CSS for the settings screen, but I think I want to rename this to settings because there's more than one setting. And sign in has sign in screen styles, and todo.css has todo screen styles. And this is the structure for JavaScript. So JavaScript files names are quite self-explanatory, but again, I want to rename settings.js to settings.js. Some main JavaScript features include fade in and out animations, signing in, and greeting by username, in real-time clock and date, current weather, navigation bar or menu, and to-do list and settings. So here are the features to be discussed. So there are some features that would go into MVP or minimum viable product. So MVP means just the basic, just the features you need to implement at least to call this a success, or like just the minimum features you need to implement at least. So first, I thought using local storage is also kind of a feature because I'll explain this later, but I'm using this not to lose data on refresh. In real-time clock and date and current weather, and I actually wanted to introduce to-do list and hiding an API key using Netlify, but I thought there's no time for this, so I apologize. And although fade in and out animations are not part of the MVP, I thought it would be great to talk about it because it would be fun to think about how we can implement them using vanilla JS only without any libraries. So first, local storage. So web storage, I'm going to talk about web storage. So according to Wikipedia, web storage provides web apps with methods and protocols for storing client-side data. Okay, this is difficult, but basically means that without a server, we can store some data with some front end within the front end. And we have window.local storage in JavaScript. And according to the Mozilla Developer Network documentation, it allows you to access a storage object for the document's origin, and the stored data is saved across browser sessions. And most importantly, local storage data has no expiration time, which made me decide to go for it because there's no server and I wanted to store data on the front end. So this is where you can access local storage. If you open, if you use Chrome, you can open the Chrome DevTools, and in the Applications tab, there's this storage, and here you have the local storage. And if you click on it, it is the local storage data is saved by key value format. These are the key, and these are the values. But why use local storage? Because we don't have a server, because it is a static web application. And we have some HTML forms, such as a sign-in form, to-do list form, settings forms, such as rename form, 24 clock toggle button, dark theme, menu on the left. And these are all HTML forms. I implemented all of this using forms. So the sign-in form, the to-do, and all of these are forms. But when you submit the form and you refresh your screen, all the data goes away. And this is the default behavior of browsers. So this is why I decided to use local storage to store data and show the user the data from local storage on refresh. So use this example. So in signin.js, I'm gonna copy this link and drop it in the chat. So we have ask for username function. And here, let's say this is the state of the current local storage. And we have the username key with your name value. So first, in this function, what we're doing here is that, so username key is defined to username string. And here, local storage.getItem will return the key's value, or null if the key does not exist in the given storage object. So if you do local storage.getItem, and if username key exists here, we'll not get null, but we'll get the value of the key. But if it doesn't exist, you'll get null. So here, on the first load up the website, when you first go to the web application, you'll be prompted a pop-up to enter your username. And this is because when you try to retrieve the value of username key from local storage, you get null because there's no username saved. So because the saved username is equal to null, you first get the login form, and then the login form, when you submit it, it calls handle login submit event handler function. But otherwise, if you have entered your form and you are refreshing it, then you just get saved username from local storage, and we just display that name using inner text. So when there's no username in storage, in this case, there's just no username key, which is string username in local storage, and thus local storage get item username key will return null, and we show the sign-in screen like this. And when the new username is being submitted, this was the event handler function here. When you submit the username, this gets called. And first, we stops browser from refreshing because the default behavior of the browser is that it refreshes when we submit something in a form. And then please look at the lines 11 and 12. So here, what we're doing is that we are setting username key with input username as key value in local storage. So once you submit your login form with your new username, this will get saved in the local storage. And when you refresh the page, we'll retrieve the username from local storage. And because of it, you will be able to see, hello, saved username. Like this. We have username, and I just said my value is my name, and the text is very small, but you can see hello, my name. So the next is fading animations. So I actually implemented some fade in and out animations here. And this can be seen in transition.css and transition.js. And I'm going to drop the link in the chat. This is transition.css. This is transition.js. So here, what we are doing is that I'm just looking at the fade in animation. And first, the argument is element, and is slow, and is after out. Is after out means that this gets executed after fade out function has been executed on that element. So if this is after executing fading out, then we remove hidden class name. You'll see later. But otherwise, we add visible. And if it is slow, if this animation is supposed to be slow, I add slow class name. So I initialize slow class name to slow, and these are the CSS class names, as you can see in here. And you see, so this is something called custom property in CSS. So previously I mentioned in variable CSS, I stored all the custom properties or variables in CSS that contain the values that get repeatedly used. And in variables.css, I set slow speed to 0.8 seconds. And I want to reuse this value whenever I want some animation to be slow. So the first usage would be in index.html and signin.js. I'm going to drop this link in the chat. So here, the first image is from index.html, and this is the hidden class. And this is something I mentioned here, hidden class name. It is defined in global.js, which is a file that includes all the variables that are used in more than one JavaScript files. So hidden is said to be opacity of 0 and visibility of hidden. So by default, I set the form background to be hidden. But when we execute the fade in, I want to first remove the hidden class name. And then I want to add visible class name, which is opacity of 1 and visibility to visible. And then this is fading out after transition duration multiplied by 2. And I think transition duration is 800. I set it to be 800. And the reason I'm set timeout is basically like asynchronous behavior of JavaScript. I want to first execute fade in, and then I want to wait for a while. And then after that, I want to execute fade out. So I want to execute fade out a little later than fade in. And this is why I use set timeout. And this is how I implemented real-time clock and date. And this is in time.js. So first, the main function is get time. So set interval is a function in JavaScript that calls a function with some interval. So for example, if I say set interval get time 1000, so this is 1000 is in milliseconds. So this is 1 second. And this basically means that I want to call get time every 1 second. But first, before I do that, I want to call get time immediately because set time first waits for 1 second to execute get time. So I call get time immediately and then I set interval. So here I'm using current time to new date object in JavaScript, and I update calendar and clock in the home screen. But I think update date would have been a better name because not really a calendar. So here I just simplified the code to pseudocode. And this is in time.js. So the clock logic is that, so I'm using pat start function. Pat start basically means that, for example, if there's a digit, if there's 1, if it is 1 p.m., I want to display 01 because I think it would be prettier. So what patstart is doing is that if I do 1.patstart 2, 0, and if the length of the string is less than 2, I add 0 until the length of the string becomes 2. And then I check is it currently AM or is the 24-hour option on from the settings screen and update things accordingly. So first I get an array, current clock of current hours, minutes, and seconds from current time and pat start 0 if the number is 1 digit. And then I check if it is currently AM or PM and if the 24-hour option on the settings screen is on. And according to the 2 Boolean values here, I do if 24-hour is on, if it is true, I remove the AM or PM text on the clock of the home screen. Otherwise, I add AM, PM back to the clock. And if current clock is equal to 0, current hours is equal to 0, this means that it is 12 AM currently, I update the current hours part index 0 of current clock to be 12 because current hours is in 24-hour format and I want to use the 12-hour format clock by default. So by default JavaScript, current hours is 0 at 12 a.m. And later, if it is not a.m. currently, and if current hours value is 1 digit long, I subtract 12 from current clock. This is the hours part, which is in 24-hour format, and pass started with 0. And then I combine and update all the text with inner text, and I call change clock color, which eventually turns clock red only when it is 5 seconds before each all clock. So in time.js, this is where I also implement the date. So again, this should have been named update date, I think. And I get the current time, and then I have declared arrays of like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like the names of days and the names of months. And then I'm calling current time.getDay, which returns like the index. And I'm using the returned integer as an index for the days and months arrays. I declare this in the at the top of the file. And then I assemble all the information within a string. And actually what this means, like in the line 8, what this means is that if this calendar is on the to-do list screen, I update the to-do calendar. But if this calendar is not the to-do list screen, like it is not on the to-do list screen, it is on the home screen, I update the home screen calendar. So you see there are two dates. So on the first is on the home screen, and the second is on the to-do list screen. So, and the next feature we'll look into is weather. So for current weather, I'm using something which is Open Weather Map API. And this is an API that is free to use. So you can sign up, you can make an account, and you get your API key, and you can use your key following the current weather API documentation, specifically by geographic coordinates part. So in the current weather, which is in weather.js, so first what I'm doing is that I'm importing API key from another file. And then so the reason I'm making this like all uppercase and constant is that it is a key and this is a raw string, and I don't want to make a mistake if I just repeatedly use this string and manually just like write it out. So I'm just declaring it as a variable. And first, I'm calling ask for location. So what this is doing is that it first gets saved location from local storage. And if saved location is null, then we prompt the user to pop up to access the user location. But when the pop-up has been allowed, we call handle geo success with position, which is a default parameter given by JavaScript, or the navigator object in JavaScript. And then we get a latitude and longitude, and then I make a coordinates object with latitude and longitude information because I want to save it into local storage. And I call get weather with false. By false, I mean the third parameter. Because when I call handle geo success for the first time, that means that the weather hasn't been saved, because we're basically prompting user because there's no weather saved in the local storage. And then this is from the Open Weather Map API documentation. So you insert latitude and longitude and API key. And what I'll do is that I get response from the API and extract weather, temperature, and city data. And if weather hasn't been saved in local storage, I fade in the weather component fades in. Otherwise, when the weather has been saved. And this happens when the user has permitted the access to location to the access to location and then later refreshes the screen. The weather component fades in. And actually, it is generally not a good idea to publicly expose your API key, especially if you have paid for it. Because if you expose your API key like on GitHub in a public repository, maybe somebody can look into it and just use it. And although this is free, I thought it would be great if I just make it private. And I wanted to introduce this later, but I thought I would be running out of time. And this is my workshop. And thank you so much for attending. And now it is time to answer some questions. Yeah, thank you for the question, username. Yeah, it is not a reserved word. Thank you so much for answering instead of me.
No problem. Yeah, thank you so much, Nayeon. It was really good. Anyone else has other questions and wishes to talk or just wants to write anything on chat?
Yeah, feel free to ask any questions about the project. I basically like stayed up a few days during the 2 weeks making the project.
It's cool what you achieved in 2 weeks. Yeah, and like, just putting down as a talk. You explained it really well, I must say. So thank you for like, going through all the details and also pasting the relevant code links. I have the slides. Is it okay if I share in the
Yeah, of
slides?
course.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good. And yeah, anyone else wants to add something or say something? Thanks for joining and like, sticking until the end of the talk. That was really good. And given the different time zones, yeah, thanks again.
Yeah. Okay, I have I've got a question. So okay. Yeah, you want to know how I hide the API key. Okay. Can you give me a moment because I wanna stop sharing
Yeah,
my
sure,
screen and
sure.
thank you. This is a feature on Netlify. Yeah, thank you so much for attending. Let me sign in to Netlify and then I'm gonna show what it looks like. This is actually possible with the build command on Netlify. Wait, please give me a moment. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen again. Give me a moment. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Can you see my entire screen?
Yes.
Can you also see the notepad?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So when you deploy on Netlify, you can actually set up something called build command. And this is where you can write the build command and build command basically means that this is a command you're gonna execute whenever you want to build your site. And here, this is the command you can use. I'm gonna copy and paste this into the chat. So I'll explain what this is doing. So cd.js means that we're changing directory to JS. So in my project, I have all the JavaScript files inside JS, which is why we are cd to JS. We are changing directory to JavaScript. And this part is basically creating a config.js file. And I am putting this inside. So \n means new line. I'm basically creating config.js that has these lines of code. So I basically put my API key here and I export it. And if we go to the project where we're implementing the weather feature, I'm importing API key from config.js. But if you look at it, look at the JavaScript directory, there's no config.js because it is a file that gets created only when you build the site on Netlify. So this way, I'm exporting the API key in config.js and I'm importing it in weather.js. But one thing to keep in mind is that when you want to export or import something using JavaScript, you need to make it type. We need to make the type to module because module is the file with the type module is where you can use the import and export. So I am importing the API key here. I hope this makes sense.
Yes, yes, of course. I also wrote a note in the chat. You can also use .env files or like npm packets like .env, like, in bigger projects. And Netlify also has this environment variables where you can set environment variables and it will automatically read from process.env files. Yeah, so there are like different ways you can choose, like any approach based on the project. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for explaining this as well, Nayeon.
Yeah, thank you. The reason I decided to go for the build command is that since this is not Node.js, it's vanilla.js, I
Right.
thought there was like no way to access environment variables. So I thought this was like the only way to hide an API key in a vanilla.js project. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending and feel free to just ask me any questions about this project or just front-end development in general. I'm not an expert, but I'll try to explain to my best ability. Yeah, thank you for attending.
Yes, thank you for attending and thank you, Nayeon, for presenting. And we will record. I mean, this has been recorded. Once it's there on YouTube, I'll let you all know, and I'll also share the slides on Slack. And thanks again, and have a nice day and have a good night.